The Steam Deck OLED in 2025 is a very curious case of a console that shouldn't be as popular as it is, but somehow it is. So I got this Steam Deck OLED in 2025, so I'm a little bit late to the Steam Deck lifecycle, but is it still worth it in 2025? So before you buy, let me walk you through what I think about the Steam Deck OLED in 2025 after using it for some time now. Just really quickly going over all the things that we have here that you probably heard a lot of times, but we have the OLED screen that goes up to 90 Hz, then you can game up to 90 Hz. That is especially nice for the indie games. For most cases, I'm gonna make the games run at 45 or 60 frames per second to just enjoy the games as much as possible. With the Steam Deck, you already get the case, so you don't have to get one. So it's already in the price of the Steam Deck. The quality of it is really good. The plastics, the way they build it, the screen, all the buttons, everything feels very solid, but it does feel pretty lightweight for the size of it. I was expecting it to be much heavier than it is. It is much lighter than I ever expected, and it's lighter than something like the Asus ROG Ally. So it does feel like it's slightly bigger, but slightly lighter. Because of that, the plastics might feel a little bit, I would say, thinner than something like the Asus ROG Ally, where the plastics felt a little bit stronger, but this is by no means not strong. It just feels a little bit lighter, which is really good in my opinion, because in the long term, it just makes it more comfortable to play with it. Overall, just as a device of itself, well, we have the analog sticks with the buttons on the top, which in my opinion is a perfect way to do it. I did not expect it to like it this much. I thought it was weird looking to have the controls on the top. It is actually the perfect decision by Valve to have it this way. Now you can actually enjoy the touchpads and have the buttons a little bit higher, which they naturally sit much closer where your fingers are. So it's just much better in my opinion. The first thing you're gonna notice, and the first thing that is most important about the Steam Deck OLED, is something that doesn't change with time: the ergonomics and the ease of use. Essentially, it just feels perfect for the hand. It has a really nice grips on the back, just feels like whoever designed this was really looking for the ergonomics of the human hand and the controls to just match it as good as possible. So it's really good in hand, it feels really nice, just everything feels comfortable. Everything falls into right where your fingers are, just making it really ergonomic. And the second thing is the ease of use, but I'm talking about the way the software works. The way you can just turn off and on the console and in a second start playing the games you're playing. So as you can see, I press it and I'm already, in this case, in the menu, but if I was in a game, I would be in a game right away. And if I'm done with gaming or I just want to have a quick break, bye-bye, and we're off. So this is how ease of use is really playing in favor of the Steam Deck OLED. Something that other PC handhelds at the moment with Windows 11 just can't really do as well as this. It is something that I would say maybe something like the Nintendo Switch can do. But we're gonna talk about that case of Nintendo Switch versus the Steam Deck in a second. There is a huge difference between the two that just doesn't really make them really compete in my opinion. Another thing is you have to consider the Steam library that you have. For example, for me, this was something that I had to consider because I had no games on my Steam library, but I had consciously tried to get games so that when I wanted to play with this, I knew that I have something that I can play on it. Well, this is something that for some you might have a lot of games and you have a perfect situation. You can add games from Epic Game Store through the Heroic Launcher. It's super easy to do. I did that and it added a couple games that I had from the Epic Store. So in that regard, I would say you have to consider if the games are on the stores that you want, because not all the games are gonna play on it. A really cool place you can get games for much cheaper is Instant Gaming. It is actually a place where I look for games before I actually get them for the Steam Deck. Plenty of times you'll find that the games on Instant Gaming are even cheaper than the sales on the Steam store. Thanks to this, you can save up on games. For example, I personally went for the Batman Arkham Trilogy and it cost just around $5. Or Batman Arkham Knight, which is just about $2.50. There's plenty of great games at a really good price that, like I said, plenty of times I found them to be cheaper than on the Steam store. And as Instant Gaming is the partner of this channel, we're doing a giveaway where one of you can win the game of your choice. If you're interested in the giveaway, check out the link down below for it. One more thing that you have to consider when thinking about the Steam Deck OLED in 2025 is its performance, the sheer power of the console. And I'm saying console because I know a lot of you are gonna say this is a handheld PC. I just feel like the handheld PCs are a little bit different, in my opinion, than the Steam Deck. I know it's a handheld PC, but the way it's made, for me, it just feels like a console, and that is what I love about it. But just the sheer performance of it, the strength, how much horsepower does this have? It is gonna be stronger than something like the Nintendo Switch. And it is not as strong as something like the Asus ROG Ally or playing on your PS5. But if you play to its strength and play older games, indie games, or even AAA games that came out just a couple of years ago, you can really take full advantage of it. And even new games, depending on the game, can be played really well on it. So I would say that it really comes down to research and kind of prioritizing what you need. For example, for me, I don't use this as my main console. I prefer to play on the big screen on PlayStation 5. But there are games that I would just prefer to play like this. For example, The Witcher 3, while I can play it on the big screen, I really wanted to experience it like this. When I turn on my PS5, I just go to my comfort games, but this just feels a little bit different, and that experience really makes it unique. So that is, in my opinion, something you have to consider. It's not the strongest compared to something like the Asus ROG Ally, and you cannot play all the games, and also some games will run not as good, but if you play to its strengths, it's gonna be wonderful. And in 2025, it doesn't feel underpowered. Well, it is underpowered on paper. The games that I tried, like the older AAA games, the indie games, like I said, depending on the games, it's gonna be running great. But in 2025, you're gonna start to run into games that are just a little bit too hard to play on it. But then we have the case of the Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is playable and verified on the Steam Deck OLED. But probably you can get better quality on different platforms. So it's a give and take, depending if you're looking at this as like a main console or a secondary. For me, it's a secondary, and I can live with all the compromises and playing different games on it than on my bigger consoles. Another thing that I love about this is the battery. It's much better than something like the Asus ROG Ally. So in my opinion, the battery on this Steam Deck is a nice improvement. It isn't the biggest and longest lasting battery, but because of its power constraints, it also means that it's not as power hungry. In turn, it means that you can play for much longer. And then if you think about it, if you're using something like the Asus ROG Ally, which has more power, but you cut the power to just take a little bit less of that juice to play, and you cut it back to like 15 watt, which comes down to pretty much the same thing as Steam Deck, you're talking about a much stronger device, but you have to throttle it back, and then you're pretty much having the same thing as Steam Deck, but just less battery even then. So in my opinion, the Steam Deck's battery is great, and it depends on the game, but even the AAA games, they last long enough that you're probably gonna have a break before this is gonna die. Unless you're playing like 10 hours a day, then yeah, that is gonna be a problem. But I guess for most, the battery that is here is more than enough. I personally never play enough to really go from 100% to 0, but for a longer flight, I would probably take a battery bank or cables to really juice it back up. And like I said, this screen is incredible. It's a really nice OLED display. It's only 800p, but on a screen of this size, it really doesn't feel bad. It's really sharp in my opinion. I know a full HD screen would be sharper, but at this size, I have to give it to them that it's really good, and it just makes the games run even better. So I would say that while 800p is starting to be a little bit on the low end compared to competition in 2025, with the Nintendo Switch 2 coming out, having Full HD on it, and Asus ROG Ally and all the other ones having Full HD, this is gonna be on the lower end. But we're also coming to a point where 800p, Full HD and more is starting to be like a diminishing return situation, where 800p is really nice, and with it being an OLED, it just looks incredible. So the games and the graphics, everything look incredible on it. And being that it's a handheld, 90 Hz, that the maximum that it can output is more than enough, because most of the time you're probably gonna play in 30, 45 or 60 frames per second anyway. In my opinion, this is pretty much like a console that if you play to its strengths, so older games, indie games, games that just don't really have that, problems with optimization, then this is gonna give you plenty of fun. And it's still super worth it in 2025. It's probably my favorite thing that I bought in 2025 because it's just such a great console. The way it works is amazing. So I feel like while it is starting to be older with each day, every month, every year, it's still holding up really nicely, so in my opinion, it's still worth it in 2025. If you're looking into one, it's great. And the last thing I wanted to mention, versus the competition, there is one significant thing. If you were to compare it to competition, the big consoles aren't really competition. Is the power, but stationary versus something that you can take with you on the go, AAA games on the go. Then we have something like the Nintendo Switch, which is way underpowered compared to this. The AAA games aren't even close to what you can get on this, and the Nintendo Switch has its own AAA games that you don't natively run on it. But overall, this is once again not a competition. I feel like it's a little bit of a different target audience here. Then we have the Asus ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, and all the other handheld PCs that work on the Windows system. Once again, I feel like it's not a real competition. In my opinion, this works much more like a Nintendo Switch or a console, where it's really easy to just turn on, put it to sleep, put the game to sleep, where the Windows handhelds have a lot of different things that just don't make it as comfortable and just, a different kind of a gaming experience. There's a lot of things that you have to do, a lot of friction between wanting to play and actually playing the games. But they do have the benefit of having the Windows for when you want to play games that are not supported on the Steam OS. So it's like a give and take. Once again, in my opinion, it's not a direct competition per se, because just this is a little bit more like a console, where the handheld PCs are more like a laptop or like a PC in the body of a handheld. Really similar, but just slightly different. So in my opinion, the Steam Deck, if you look really closely, doesn't really have competition that can fight on equal footing, like the Xbox Series X and the PS5. This just feels like it's a little bit on its side, a little bit of its own unique niche. But if you like that niche, it's definitely the one to get. That being said, if you have any more questions about the Steam Deck, let me know in the comment section down below. And that is gonna be the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video once again, and I'll see you next time.